Leadership doesn't show up in boardrooms or strategy sessions. It shows up in how we make decisions, how we handle pressure, and how we lead ourselves when no one is watching. Welcome back to Voices of Impact, the space where we explore leadership beyond tactics, titles, and performance, and into identity, presence, and real transformation. Today's conversation is one I've been genuinely excited about because we have very similar ways of leading. So I'm joined by Sarah Keffer, an award-winning leadership development expert and certified executive coach who helps leaders and teams move beyond performative leadership into more powerful, purpose, and human-centered ways of working. So she's also former Division All-American athlete, so bringing lived leadership under pressure together with executive experience across corporate, nonprofit, government, and tech sectors. So what sets Sarah apart isn't just her credentials, but it's really her lens where she sees leadership, right? So she challenges the idea that leadership is about proving yourself. Instead, she teaches that sustainable impact begins with identity. So Sarah and I share a belief that shapes everything we do. So it starts with who you are, not the role you hold. So this conversation invites us to rethink how we lead, how we build trust, and how we create influence without burning out or disconnecting from ourselves in the process. So welcome, Sarah. So glad to have you on the show.
Really happy to be here. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. That's great. So let's get into it. So Sarah, can you share the moment or series of moments when you realize that who you are matters more than what you do as a leader?
Yeah, who I am mattering more than what I do. And gosh, there's so many moments I feel along the way. Even you mentioned my swimming days. Even back then, as a teenager moving into young adulthood, who I was a swimmer, and that was a title that defined me, right? I think, before I moved into this work, I was a leader in the tech world. I was a VP in marketing. I ran a global performance marketing division, and I worked with a company for 5 years, and I was the #1 business growth unit in revenue for over 18 months. So we're talking, I grew that business from 90 million in revenue to 225 million in revenue in under 5 years. So a lot of growth. And it was constantly an ask for more. Continuing to ask for more, to the point where it did come to a head where I could either make decisions that would compromise who I was and continue to have that kind of growth, or I would have to make a decision to choose myself. I have one particular moment that really stands out where I was asked to burn a few $1 million. Meaning, when you are a public entity, you have to report out how much money is being made. And we were pacing way too high on revenue. And so I was asked to burn the money and countered and found ways of using that money, giving it back to the employees, sharing it with those who had performed really well, and trying to support those that had made it possible for us to be in that position. And unfortunately, that was not the decision that was carried through. And that was the first time that I really, instead of letting that continue to be my identity, the performer, the growth person, this marketer, I really said, I don't think this is who I am. And I don't feel right in my head, in my heart, and in my gut. And let me tell you, there was a whole lot of, what does this mean after a moment like that, right? But that moment, that catalyst was the chance for me to say, I need something else. I am something else. I'm no longer aligning with this role. And now I need to choose myself and make a decision on what is going to be next for me in my leadership journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing your story, because I know a lot of executives who are watching this can resonate with your story, right? It's like, yes, I, hit the goals and the KPIs and I feel like I'm successful, but then there's like something missing. There's like an empty feeling inside you, right? And it's really wonderful to see how you're self-aware, right? Because a lot of people just keep going and they're like, later on, they regret that. Shit, was this really what I wanted to do? But you were self-aware of like, how do I really feel? Like something's missing. This doesn't align. And that's very important, right? That emotional intelligence and everything. So I'm so glad that you were like, hey, you know what? It's okay to say no. I just don't align and I need to go to a different direction, right? So this is great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it's scary.
It's not, yeah. And it's, like you said, scary. And there's an internal resistance where your heart's saying one thing and your mind saying something else. And I've talked to my clients and I've talked to so many executives and they're just like, Vina, how do I navigate this? Right. So, and it's really going back to your North Star, like you said, it's understanding what do I truly want? Who am I? What's my identity? So, and going into the next question of how have recognitions for partners like Google or features like CBS that you have gotten influenced how you define legacy and impact, right? How has that evolved?
Yeah. Well, when you're building and doing the work on that kind of large stage,
Yeah.
everybody's looking at you, right? And
Right.
so it almost further emphasizes that your identity is this leader, this role, this title, right? And so you kind of, I even found myself gravitating more and more towards those accolades to try to not only prove to myself that I knew what I was doing and I was capable and I deserved to be in the seat that I was in, but also it was social proof, right? If I was saying something, then if Google or CBS or Meta or somebody else was saying, yeah, we believe in Sarah, it made the rest of the audience believe in me, right?
Mhm.
And so it really, I had to, just like a title, have to be able to let that go. But one thing that it really taught me outside of just the accolades and the recognition, what it really taught me was that you have to practice what you preach, right? Especially in the leadership development space. And you know this, especially in the coaching space, right? You can,
Mhm.
you know, when there's a disconnect, when someone is supporting you and they aren't doing that work themselves too.
Mhm.
They aren't showing up vulnerably. They aren't holding you accountable because they don't know how to hold themselves accountable, right? And so by being on those large stage and having those accolades, it really taught me, outside of the fact that I wasn't those titles and I needed to figure out who I was, it taught me that I better be doing my own work.
Mhm.
I better be practicing what I preach because anybody is going to see it because now the stakes are higher.
Yeah.
And so that is really kind of how I think about the accolades and the accomplishments really coming forward, is it continues to push me to make sure that I'm showing up well for myself, because that is how I show up well for others.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it. I love how you said that and real practice what you're preaching because I've been in rooms, I've talked to a lot of people who are corporate executives or leaders who didn't practice what they preach, right? And they had, I see it on their LinkedIn, I see that all of the accolades, and I'm like, oh, we think that they're like amazing, but it's also, yes, it's great on paper, but it doesn't really define who you are. It's nice to have, but who you are is how you lead, like you said. Practice what you're preaching. Like you said, if you want to hold someone else accountable, are you showing up that way? Right. So being that model for others first, getting your ducks in a row first, knowing yourself first, your strengths and your shortcomings, and working on that every single day. Right. And that leads to true impact. And then when you're a model for others, that's your legacy, that ripple effects, right? So absolutely, it's not about like, I mean, I think you and I both have great accolades, but we don't lead from that. We lead from this is who we are. We are, a coach, a leader in some way or some form, also a mother or a daughter, but this is how we lead from our values, right? So
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
How do you help leaders, so going into this, identify, though, these core strengths and consistently lead? Because I've had a lot of women especially say, like, I'm leading, but they kind of go back to those, like, societal conditions. So identifying their strengths consistently and leading from that place every time rather than defaulting to expectations.
Yeah, I love this question. And when I think about it, outside of the assessments, it's unique per person, right? What your
Mhm.
core strengths are and how you kind of identify them. So I'm going to give you a few ideas that I have used that work. I think one of the first things when you're really trying to find your core strengths, you start to just think about adjectives. I am trustworthy and decisive, and I am compassionate and collaborative, and you have all these words, but maybe Vina, those are your words to define your leadership, and it's right for you, and then maybe my words are different, and it's
Mhm.
right for me. And we are still both great leaders. And so then you have to kind of almost look at the definition of what leadership is, because if the adjectives change, then how can anybody get it right? Right. And that's why I really talk about and really zone in on strengths when it comes to somebody identifying their leadership, understanding who they are and how they lead, and becoming somebody who's worth following as a leader. And so one solid way to do that is thinking about what makes you successful anywhere you go. What is something that nobody can take away?
Yeah.
Right? Something that you're proud of in the hardest moments, that you that is just innate and natural to you. The second thing I think about and really want to challenge when it comes to strengths is like, what is under the surface? So let's talk about trust, right?
Mhm.
I think a lot of leaders might be like, well, I think my core strength is trust. Well, that's kind of another adjective, right? But we say that is valued in being a leader, but what actually makes someone trust you?
Right. Yeah.
Is it made by you just saying, I'm trustworthy, you should trust me, right? This is an adjective, this is my strength. No, the strength is that you showed up authentically time and time and time again. You are consistent in how you led your team, how you explained the why, the way you provided them air cover, the way you moved forward with accountability and also empathy, right? And the consistency of you being you enough times is when the staff and the organizations are willing to take the step forward and trust you, right? That's how you become trustworthy. And so there's something in there that is a core strength that is showing up. And so I really want to challenge leaders to think about that, right? If you want to describe yourself by these these adjectives, which are wonderful and great, but what actually is under there? What are you doing time and again when the days are tough, when leadership is hard, to earn the trust, to show you're decisive, to show you're collaborative? That is your core strength. That is really where the magic sits with you uniquely. So those are kind of some of the things that really can start to bring about what a core strength is, and have somebody really start to understand their identity outside of the titles that they possess. And it usually just kind of snowballs from there on what comes out of the conversation. I'll tell you, I tend to be a little visually heavy and like visualizations and things like that, because oftentimes if I were to ask you as a leader, what's your core strengths, right? What are you great at? What makes you successful all the time? You're like, I have no idea. I have no idea.
Right.
And so it's really fun to step out of the roles that we sit in and me be like, who's a movie character that you identify with?
Mhm.
Why do you identify with them? Who is someone you are motivated by? Why are you motivated by them? When we can hold up the mirror in a different way, it really starts to have people innately and intuitively bring out these things that are so them. And you can come at it in this different, creative, magical way that is so unexpected. And it's really, really fun to behold and watch someone kind of blossom into understanding their identity in that way. So anytime I can, get us out of the box and a little creative and playful with finding out our strengths is always fun.
Yeah. Wow, this is so great. I love this. And you're similar to me because I do agree. It's like asking, like, what are your strengths? You kind of have to go deeper. And I've worked with other coaches, like, as as a success coach, and they were just like, just ask the strengths. And I'm like, it doesn't really work that way. You kind of have to ask, like, I asked one person, like, why do you love your dog? Like, she was just so passionate about her dog. And she was like, I was like, why do you love your dog? And she's like, because he's so loyal and compassionate. That's what exactly who she is. And then that's what she values, right? So like
Yeah.
you said, being creative, whiteboarding it out, visual makes things so much easier. And I love how you said about going deeper, right? It's one thing to say trustworthy, but having examples in your own life, how you were trustworthy. And not just as a leader in career, but even, like I said, as a mom, as a daughter,
Mhm.
as a girlfriend, whatever that is, right? In your
Yeah.
relationships in all aspects. How are you resilient? Like showcase it, talk about that, that vulnerability, that storytelling that women have, like use that as a gift, right? So yeah, so rather than going role-based, understand and ask yourself these deeper questions, but in a more creative way, right? So just
Yeah.
journaling them down. So absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. This is a really important message because
Uh,
I think a lot of people just are so focused on titles and roles and they go back to it. But like you said, that consistency piece, this is like an everyday thing, like a muscle that you have to strengthen. It has to be done on an everyday basis. So
mhm.
amazing.
Well, and also our strengths, not to cut you off, or I think I did, but
No,
our strengths can also kind of flex on the wrong side sometimes too, right? That
yeah.
is a whole nother deeper realization that comes out. No, so anytime I provide an assessment, I always make sure that I have done that and understood. And so I'm going to speak to Strengths Finder. That's
Yeah.
an assessment I use. I really like. Competitive happens to be one of my strengths. It's what gave me my All American 7 times over, right? It's what produced me being a VP by mid 30s. And also, it's what made me crazy in the brain to continue to push and lose myself at all costs because I needed that prize, because I needed that win, because I needed that accolade or that revenue, and to show that I could do it. Right. And so when you identify your strengths, chances are there's a shadow side that can kind of come up to help you know that doesn't feel good. And chances are that is one that you are really, really, really powerful, kind of like Superman. But you have to learn how to hone and
Mhm.
know when we're flexing in and it's driving you a little bit off the map instead of towards a really consistent goal and showcasing your leadership.
Yeah. And I do agree because I was like that, right? Like, I think both of us are very high achievers and I had to like overprove myself. I have this and I was all that, right? With the accolades and I'd be so proud. But then I was like, wait, this is not just me. Like, who am I truly at the core? And just, I think that message for women is it's like I said, it's really nice to have that. But the foundation is these traits that use these gifts, like you talked about, that women have like trustworthiness, resilience, you're compassionate. And it's okay to be competitive, but competitive with like knowing that you can also be soft and, all those things to put together, right?
Right.
So, and it's very important to look within on an everyday basis. Like you can be both. And I have some people who are like the or thing, like you can be this or that. You can be both. You can be soft and powerful. You can be soft and competitive. Like that's what makes you thrive and successful, right? So going into that question of, I know we have that prize and we look like we're proud about that. We're proud about that. How do you coach leaders to hold power, true power, without losing humility and confidence without being domineering?
Yeah, this is a great question. So, one thing that a lot of people don't realize about leadership when maybe they are wanting to move into a leadership role, maybe they're a middle manager and haven't moved into that senior leadership role yet. All you do is manage tensions. You are not solving problems anymore. You are
Right.
managing how to be flexible and stable, how to be confident and humble, how to set vision and also get into the details, how to control and also command and influence, how to be powerful and also decisive or humble or soft. And so when I think about power, that word, the kind of connotation around it isn't always the most positive,
Right.
especially when we think about women and giving ourselves permission to feel powerful. But I'll tell you, when you know your strengths and you're leaning into those, that is power because that is where you
Yeah.
get that confidence, where you get that reassurance, where you get that resilience, where even if you didn't land a presentation or your business didn't do what it needed to do, or if you're, an independent entrepreneur or a fractional CMO, PPM, whatever, you can know that you are still you because you were showing up as you.
Yeah.
And so that's really how I think about power is you now have the toolbox to be powerful. And what that looks like for me is obviously different than what it looks like for you. But as long as you are focusing on your strengths and that toolbox that you have for yourself, then you've already won. Then you've already been able to kind of know how to start to balance that tension of, I don't really know how to hold my team accountable without losing the empathy. Well, let me go into my toolbox. What makes me feel powerful? Where is my strengths? Okay, maybe my strength is in explaining the why and the communication and bringing people together and influence. Well, I can do that by being empathetic and the tension of accountability as well, and feel really good at the end of the day. So that's really how I think about power. That's how I think about these things that we are expected to do in this new level and this new wave of leadership once we get to kind of that senior executive level, is managing that as a tension, but having your toolbox as your power.
Yeah. Absolutely. I love that. I love that. And like you said, having a toolbox, whatever happens, things can like be unpredictable. You're going to have society judge you. That's conditioning. But at the end of the day, you know your worth. And that comes from your power, like you said. When you have this toolbox, you can just kind of look back at it and you're like, you know what? I was resilient. I can do this, like you said, be powerful and soft. Have that humility and confidence. You have both. And that's what a true leader is, right? And when you have that and you lead with that itself is powerful. You influence everyone. And the fact that you just, as especially women, the fact that you're present, and the fact that you exist is enough, right? Like you said, that itself is a winner. So absolutely, this itself is very powerful, right? So amazing.
Yeah. I often, when I'm leading my leadership development academy, I start with 2 rules. It's all about you, and it's not about you. So part of it is you better figure yourself out and know it's all about you. And on the other hand, it ain't nothing to do with you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you start there, wow, the aperture completely changes on what you think leadership actually is. And you have no choice but to learn who you are and to lead from that place. And then that how it feels starts to really, really come alive and change you through that kind of framework.
Right. Exactly. Absolutely. I love that. Yeah. So it's about you because you have to work on yourself. It's also not about you when it comes from other people, right? How people perceive you. So make sure that you know truly who you are. So a message again, always remind yourself that. So going into connection killers. So how do leaders unintentionally create disconnection when they prioritize output over relationships?
How much time do we have? I mean, I think right there you said it. A connection killer is when we prioritize the work over the people. You're going to kind of lose every single time. I really loved, there was this illustration from a TEDx presenter that I just saw, and I'm going to try to not mess it up as I describe it to you. But he was in a meeting, and he brought one of his senior staff up, and they were standing in a doorway, and he said, okay, we're going to just walk 7 paces together. And so kind of had his hand on his back, and so they together walked 7 paces. And he's like, okay, let's go back and do that same thing again. So they walked together back. And he goes, okay, what's half of 7? Well, 3.5, right? So he's like, okay, let's walk 3.5. And the guy's like, I don't know what we're doing, but we're doing it together. Like he wasn't warned. He just kind of was going along with it. So at that 3.5 steps, the boss, the CEO, turns and starts to push on the guy. And the guy immediately goes like this and pushes back. And he stops. And then so the CEO stands back. And then he comes at him with more energy. And he pushes him and pushes and pushes him. And the guy kind of stands there and pushes against him. Right? Mm-hmm. That, to me, is a beautiful illustration of how we can kill connection.
Right. Yeah.
This individual that he was pushing against or he was walking alongside had no idea what the boss was going to do, but he went along with it. And there was connection when they were doing it together. But when there was force, when there was immediately met with resistance.
Yes.
And so as leaders, we have to think about what are we forcing? What are we pushing versus when are we bringing them towards us, pulling them or walking alongside them? And one of obviously we could talk all day about AI and the disconnection that is coming from how organizations are moving so quickly towards AI without an actual strategy or people person intent and approach and prioritization. So that's definitely one. And then two, again, not knowing yourself. If you don't know who you are never going to know the motivations of somebody else. So you're constantly going to be pushing on them. And man, that's going to kill that connection. You're never going to get trust. You can tell me you're going to be collaborative all day. You aren't. And so when you know yourself and you know your strengths, you can now say, I wonder what motivates that person. I wonder what's the pull behavior or walking alongside them that allows us to connect to be better together. And so that is really where I encourage leaders to start thinking of, once they have done the internal work to figure out who they are, how they show up, what they represent in their leadership, and get really strong on their values and identity from that place, then they can say, what am I doing that is causing a break in connection? One of my absolute favorite examples of a connection killer, first one, a connection killer is not knowing yourself. Like, flat out right there, we're done. Like, if you don't know yourself, you just lost connection, because people can read through it. We are smart humans these days. Somebody's going to see that like that. The second is the story you're telling yourself in your head. So many of us as leaders are doing so many things. We're working so fast. We have 13 meetings a day. We have 5 minutes to ourselves. And once we leave work, we're going and being pulled in different directions by our partners, our spouses, our children, our dogs, our cats, our families. And so in order to be in an environment like that, we have to process and make things in our head fast. We have to get to a decision and tell ourselves something to process it and move on. That's literally how the human brain works. We have half of our brain trying to keep us keep us surviving. But what it does is it makes up stories about certain things. And so let's take, for instance, somebody on the team comes to, let's say, me and says, we're not going to meet this goal, blah, blah, blah. Well, I have the choice of now saying, well, they talked to me about this and their attitude was really negative, and I just don't agree with what they said because I didn't like their attitude. It was negative. They aren't correct. When I just told myself that story, I now made that a fact, because that was me trying to survive so that I could solve the problem, so that I could move forward and be the leader that I was supposed to be. Well, you just severed any connection you had with that person. What if that person was actually disappointed that they didn't meet the goal, worried about bringing it to you, thinking that they were going to now disappoint you as their leader, brought that fear forward anyway, showed up and talked to you, talk about doing it scared, right? Showing up, talking to you, and you just completely were like, I don't believe you. This is what I made up in my head. I'm moving on, right? And so that kind of the brain, the survival brain, the brain that's constantly trying to process information, be decisive, and move on, can be our biggest connection killer as leaders. And the only way to get through that is to give ourselves the space, the margins to take a breath, to know that our brain is doing that and be like, wait a minute, what's actually going on here? What am I missing in this? Are you okay? Have that story that actually comes from them, not us. So I know I went like a long-winded way around that, but
I love that. That's great.
I see that so much in leaders because, again, we're just moving so fast in order to do the work that we got to do.
It's all about, like, sometimes we just assume things, but, asking questions, like, this is always something that's my strength. And I look at other leaders. I'm like, yeah, just don't assume, just ask questions. And where are they coming from? What did they want? Like, what's the context behind that? So really leading with empathy and then coming to that conclusion, right? When you have conflicts. And I love how you talked about the whole, like, TEDx thing of the pressure. And this also relates to the nervous system regulation, right? So we're kind of nervous, or they're going to say something, or we're going to be judged. And it comes from a place of, like you said, the mindset piece, the story that we tell ourselves. And if we come from a place of, like, scarcity, that, oh my God, what are they going to say? Like, this is not going to happen. We kind of pressure the person and put pressure and force things rather than, like, hey, let it come from alignment. Are we truly aligned? Want to work together? So it's all from a place of that. So absolutely. And what transformations, so I know you do work with clients as a coach. So what transformations do you see that they report to you when they stop outsourcing their power and start leading from within?
Transformations do I see when they start leading from within? I mean, life-changing. That's the only word I think
Yeah.
that can truly describe what that looks like and how humbling and how much of an honor it is to be part of that for somebody. You know, I think I posted this recently on LinkedIn. Sometimes when you do the work that we do, you don't necessarily get to see the ripples and the impact fully. And I had the opportunity to see that recently and be reminded of that through that life change and that transformation, and to know that work matters. But not only that it matters to them, but they are now mattering more to others and be able to find their purpose and pursue that more diligently, more passionately, and more effectively, which again, we all know when you're more effective in who you are, the business outcomes will follow. So I would say, you know, I think just kind of that identity piece again, really kind of locking into place, seeing people blossom and shine from a place of just knowing they can be anything that they want to be. You get to choose that, but then you have to continue to choose that and show up every single day, do the work, do the self-reflection, reorient when you start to see the shadow side popping up, or that anxiety hits, or that frustration, or when you made up that story that killed the connection. That I think is really a transformation in itself, is when we can step back, see those moments, and say, ooh, let me go and talk to that person. Let me go apologize. Let me see how I can kind of show up a little differently, because I know it matters. And that's who I want to be as a human, right? Like having everybody become who they want to be and flourish in that is just like such a amazing thing.
Yeah. And I can relate to all of what you're saying because I see that in my clients. And like you said, we don't see it immediately, like the effects and the ripple, but that's not what it's about. It's not really the outcomes. It's like you see that transformation from before and after. It's just really life changing that the mindset shifts, like you said, orient, like kind of going back into, hey, I have this anxiety. How do you shift that? How do you lead from your values and your purpose, looking at the bigger picture, right? And owning your power from within. These are some, even the podcast right now, a lot of people have come to me saying, like, this is so powerful. I feel so happy. I feel seen. And those like small moments are wins, right? Having every coach or leader who's listening, it's like, it's yes, we have those outcomes, but kind of just collaborate with people, build their relationships, get to know them, and just kind of know that like it's really about who you are. You just need to show up and really deeply serve. And that itself is a huge impact on others. Right. So absolutely. I love what you said. So
Yeah.
amazing.
You know, I gotta tell you, I was terrified of public speaking. In fact, I was so bad at presenting and public speaking that my old company hired me a coach, because they were like, you're terrible. And if you are going to be part of leadership, you have to figure this out. And through that, kind of did how to show up, figure out kind of who I was and how to show up more authentically. And then when you kind of go through that transformation, not only can you do the hard things, even though you do it scared, right? You still do the hard things, but you know you're going to be okay on the other end,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
You know that if it only resonated with one person and 99 others didn't get it, that's okay. That one
That's
person
right.
got what they needed, and that's just fine.
Exactly.
And so, like, you almost that whole perspective changes on
Right.
what you're doing, as long as you're living in your purpose and living in your values, like you just said. Like, the stakes are a little different and the intention's a little different, and you don't need these big numbers. You don't need going back, you don't
Right.
need the accolades, because you're like, "That was the one person that needed it." And also, I'm gonna be okay on the
Yeah.
other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And it's even if it's adding one, like you said, one value to one person, that it feels with numbers wise, it feels small, but impact wise, it's huge, right? And that's how I learned from my mentors. So like you said, it's really just a change in perspective and the lens that you see it in. And it makes life so much easier, running your life and your business with ease. You're a better coach, you're a better leader, you're a better role model. And you're actually thriving, because we all believe thriving has to be like numbers and hitting those revenue goals, but it's really not. It's the amount of people who you impact in even the smallest way, right? So just a reminder on that. So absolutely. And one question. So I think, I've seen a lot of executives, a lot of people, they base their identity on money, right? So going into the revenue piece, which is, I think like coming back to this perspective. So what belief about success or money should leaders release immediately and, not make it like tied to their identity?
What should they? This is a great question. What should we release immediately? What money means to us is probably where I would start. And I think, for if I were to ask what money means to you, it could be different than what money means to me. A universal thing is that money means security, right? But you have to be willing to also talk about the other side of that, of what am I willing to sacrifice? What am I giving up in order to make this money? And I imagine that even if you aren't having those conversations, if you are misaligned, if you are not living with an intentional lifestyle, if you're not living in your purpose, you don't know your values, you're going to hit that point and it's not going to feel very good. And so you will be kind of, I don't want to say forced, but forced to reevaluate where money sits. And is it the number one priority anymore, or are there other things that are worth more to you than what that money looks like? To me, when we talk about transformation and transitions, one of the hardest things that I went through and that I had to confront, and a lot of leaders that are going through transformation and change have to confront, is that our growth is no longer linear. So, for most of us, we had a very linear path. We did the work in high school to get to college. We did the work in college to get the job. We got the job. We did the work to get the promotion. We kept making more money and got the promotion, kept making more money and got the promotion. And then we hit this point that some of us are willing to go through and say, I am going to do something different. And now we start to navigate what that looks like. And if we continue to expect it to look and to feel like that linear path, we've already lost.
Right. Yeah.
We have to, if we expect to get it right, that first point, kind of like we did, in the past, we've already lost it. Right. And so we have really, to change our perspective again on a new form of growth can look like, and where success and money actually belong in the stack rank of things that are important to us, and what we're no longer willing to sacrifice and risk for our own well-being and becoming our best selves.
Yeah. Everything that you said was just amazing. Yeah, it's so powerful. Because I know a lot of people, looking at the money mindset, they just have the societal conditioning of, money grows on trees. You're supposed to have that linear path, go to college, go to school, all of this, and then the corporate, right? And for people who are like, I want to be different, I want to be a rebel, trailblazer, we kind of oscillate between the two. Like, oh, I need the money, but then when it comes to coaching, I'm not going to see money or whatever, right? But looking at a different perspective is like, what are you willing to sacrifice to get this? What does that look like for you? Money could be generational wealth. It could be financial freedom. It's a different definition for everyone.
Yeah.
So asking these deeper questions, like you said, we're going back to that different lens and wearing it and looking at what's the why behind everything. So it's very important. And I wanted to put this out there because this just keeps coming up for a lot of people that I talk to.
I love that. I did a lot of things for free. When I left my marketing leadership, my VP role, I didn't know where I would land, right? There was a lot of experimentation in this new wave of growth. It was definitely not linear. It was like
Right.
Climbing Mount Everest, you kind of get to a precipice and you got to eat your lunch and drink your water and then maybe take a different trail or change your shoes, right? It was a little bit of a windy journey, and I did a whole lot for free, and I would not change it one bit
Mhm.
because it meant that I was showing up and
Right.
what I said was important to me.
Yeah.
And, it's paid off through connections. It's paid off through people, their lives changing, them pursuing things that are more important to them, and then making more money, right? And, those kind of things that come in time, and success looks and is defined a little bit differently. But that was a decision that I made to let go of the money. Wasn't easy. Not saying that at all. Do the things for free in order to really prove that this is who I want to be. This is what I want to do. Time and time again, that I found that purpose. I found that identity, and I'm willing to prove it to myself and kind of live in that way of being versus living focused on that success and money.
Yeah, absolutely. And likewise, I mean, I realized a lot more about myself when I was not following the crowd, even though I had a lot of societal conditioning. And as a woman of color, we have a lot going on. And
Mhm.
unlearning that and then realizing, because I know I come from a little bit of a poor family and, they had to work hard, immigrants. And I was like, okay, maybe I have to work so hard to get that money, right? And I live differently, I lead differently, but I wouldn't change a thing right now.
Yeah.
Even today, like just being on this episode with you and also giving a platform for others. And like you said, just creating the connections and powerful conversations like this just is way worth more than just like the money, right? And the money is the byproduct, of course,
Mhm.
revenue gen wealth, but start with relationships, start with connections because it can take you far. So
Yeah.
amazing. This was so great conversation. I just love this. So let's go into the fun rapid fire round. I want to get to know you a little bit personally. So let's see. Answer that comes to mind. So which one do you prefer? CEO glam day or no makeup hoodie day?
Well, as a swimmer, yeah, I am usually a no makeup, no frills person. I got my scarf and necklace.
Yeah.
So I would say I am more authentically me when I'm in a hoodie and just chilling in my workout clothes.
Nice. Likewise. It's just, I love that. Like, just be you, right? That itself
Yeah.
is great and good enough. So amazing. And what song instantly puts you in your power?
Ooh. Oh man. I gotta tell you, I am obsessed with Bad Bunny. Like so
Mm,
obsessed with, I mean, I don't even it doesn't even have to be a specific song by him, but anything. There's just the joy is radiated from his music. He's so authentically him. He's literally doing everything that we've talked about, right?
right.
We're all leaders, really truly. Leadership isn't just a title. Like we are all
Yeah.
leading somebody or something in our life. And so that is my kind of go-to um lately, like just to immediately snap into my power and to my joy and to everything good I want to be. I will tell you, I'll part two because I never play by the rules. I have this song. It's called September Song by Agnes Obel. It's a composed piece of music. It's so beautiful. And when I am a little too in my feels, that is something that really helps rebalance me to just to reground and come back to who I am. It's a very beautiful piece of music and it's pretty relaxing.
I do agree with the Bad Bunny. I was watching the halftime show and I was like in my power. I was like, oh my God, this
Oh
is
my god.
great. Super authentic. And that Latina, I was just like pumped up when I was watching him. So I can relate. Just so real and how he brought.
I burned like my aura ring was like I burned 90 calories in 12 minutes because I was dancing around my house and one of my dogs was like, "What are you doing?" She was just staring at me with judgment. I'm like, I don't even care. I'm so happy right now.
Yeah, yeah. I think everyone was, and because I watched the halftime and I was like, it's the typical thing, but he really like owned it, and I like Latina and all that, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I can relate. It's amazing. I love this. And what's one unserious thing you love that surprises people?
One unserious thing I don't know that anybody would be surprised that I'm a massive goofball. I can't help it. I would say my dancing is pretty unserious. My gift game and memes are pretty unserious. I share those quite freely. Yeah, I would say just how I express myself to especially those that know me well in my community can lean very unserious at times.
Mhm.
And I think, like, that's again, that kinda goes to what we've talked about, like,
Right.
I gotta be me every
Exactly.
day that I can. I even got my speaking of unserious, I got my bracelets on that say my dog's names that came from my bestie's daughter, who's basically my niece. This
Mhm.
isn't serious. I
Right.
wore this when I was presenting to a group of 400 people on Wednesday because it's me.
Yeah, it's
So
you.
I
Be you.
I gotta show up
Yeah.
as me every time, and that feels pretty good once you kinda identify those things.
Right. Oh, that's so cute. No, I love that. I love how just amazing you are and you just own
Aw,
yourself,
thank
right? So
you.
that's really inspiring. Yeah, I mean, I know people have to be performative, I have to wear this, I have to wear that. And I'm like, just be you, even on this podcast. Just unfiltered. So yeah, and that's
Yeah.
great. Great. And a lot of people might not like it or resonate. It's fine. They're not for you, and be
Mhm.
with the people who are for you. And that's what I remind myself every day, that you're going to have people who might be hating on you, don't like you, might be intimidated, but you're going to have people who love you and admire you and
Yeah.
want to be friends, right? So,
Yeah.
but don't just dim your light for anyone or
Yeah.
anything, right? So own your voice and your power.
I think arguably I'm gonna just double click on a point you said. I still use
Yeah.
my tech buzzwords, even though I don't really work in tech anymore. You will probably have more haters, more people that
Yeah.
don't like you when you are yourself
Right.
for a variety of reasons that you may never understand.
Right.
So know that that's there and that's coming, and it's still worth it.
Yeah. And if you do have haters, like you're doing a good job. I mean, I'm there, and I've had people who don't like me for certain things I say, but, I'm
Yeah,
me, but the right people will, right?
I love
But
that.
just keep being you, right? So this conversation was just amazing. So thank you for being you and for showing up.
You
So
too.
it's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't about performing at a higher level, but it's about becoming more aligned with who you already are, right? So what stands out most is that, when leaders stop leading from fear and pressure and start leading from identity, everything changes. Like Sarah said, trust deepens, burnout decreases, and influence expands. So for everyone listening, I invite you to reflect on this. Where are you in your leadership? Are you performing instead of embodying who you truly are? Right. So very, very important question. If this conversation resonated and you're a CEO ready to align identity, strategy, and presence, this is exactly the work we deepen inside my Sovereign Aligned CEO program and within the Sovereign Rise Collective, launching soon. Because leadership doesn't scale through force, it scales through alignment. So Sarah, thank you for the clarity, integrity, and depth you bring to the leadership space. And to our listeners, until next time, not who you think you need to be. So I'll
Yeah.
leave you with that.
Bye, everyone.